brought to you by De Familia Voces, a publishing company. The following is part of a discussion on Writings for an Open Mind, Volume 3. This discussion was filmed on Sunday, September 26, 2021. I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Which story do you want to discuss next?
I think we were gonna talk about being thankful, right?
Okay.
Well, let's do that one. So the first thing that I think is very well done is that you only mention that the guy eating lunch is wearing a uniform. So you never tell the reader, you let the reader assume what they think. Is he in the military? Is he a cop? When he starts talking about his work, it sounds like he might just be, a construction worker on the side of the road. Maybe he's wearing his orange jersey with the reflectors on it, or something like that. So I thought that was very well done, how you left that completely wide open and never really give too many clues as to what this guy does.
Yeah, I wrote it I wrote it like that, this way that the reader can, it's up to them to determine like who I'm talking about or what kind of job this guy has. But when I wrote it, I did write it as a specific worker.
No.
For me, it was a specific worker that I had in mind, but I was trying not to be too specific about it.
Right.
Where this way, the reader can use their imagination. Like, well, what does he do? Like what's this? What job does this guy have?
Right.
Anyway. What's up, bud?
I knew he wasn't military because he's like, "Are you talking to me?" Because most military guys I know, when people come up to him and say, "Thank you for your service," they're all like, "Oh, thank you." And even my son's like that. He's wearing his navy blues, and people come over and he goes, "Oh, thank you." But
What's up? This is JR. JR is tired of being ignored, so he wants to get in the conversation.
Hi, JR.
So,
Aww.
For those who are listening on the podcast, you may hear him whining in the background. But if you're watching this on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook, you'll get to see a 75-pound baby who, he's no longer a pit bull. He lost his pit bull card.
Oh, big baby. Look at him. Look at him.
Yeah. And also JR, otherwise known as Knucklehead.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Or pain in the ass or stinky. What are you doing? Come on. All right. The camera's that way. You gotta look that way, bud.
He doesn't care.
All right, come on. Get up. Now I'm covered in dog hair. Okay. What else?
So we can get more into why is this guy not feel appreciated?
I think the way I wrote it, the job that I had in mind specifically was a sanitation worker.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of professions that people look down on, and they don't really care about, but these jobs have to get done. There's other professions where they're put on a pedestal, and when you read through it and you get to the end of it, you kind of see what profession that is, in my view, to where if you're in a uniform, you're special. It doesn't like certain uniforms. If it's law enforcement, military, anything like that, society looks at them as being high up on a pedestal for no reason. Now, some of those people have done stuff to where they should be put on a pedestal, and I'm not saying that they haven't. Some of them have done stuff that was extremely brave, where they have, prevented something from happening, or they saved somebody's life. But just because they are in that job where they wear that uniform, people look at them as being up here, in my opinion. But when you see other professions, they don't really get any recognition. And I think those professions should. So when you see somebody where it's like, oh, look at this guy, he's over there eating, like I don't want to interrupt him, but I want to thank him for doing what he's doing. If he's a sanitation worker, or if he's a truck driver, or even if he's just a teacher, somebody who's a school teacher.
So,
I think we should put more focus on that.
So after I sold my house, before I moved out here, one of the things that I specifically did was thank the garbage guys, because they were there twice a week, every week, regardless of the weather, without fail. They might get delayed a day because of snow, but they're there the next day. And they were just incredible how consistent they were. And so I went out and I thanked them, and I actually got them a 6-pack of beer, and I gave them a 6-pack of beer to thank them.
That was
And
nice.
they were, and they were really nice too. They were like, "Oh man, thanks. We really appreciate it." And, you've been really good as well, because like I only had trash like every 3 weeks or something, because I had 2 trash cans and it was just me in the house. So it took me 3 weeks to fill up 3 to 4 weeks to fill up 2 trash cans. But they were really cool, and they were really appreciative.
Yeah, without that profession, we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to move around too well with all the trash in the street. But even some of these other professions, a truck driver, driving a truck isn't exactly easy.
Nope.
People think that it is. Oh, you're just sitting there driving. It's like a lot of times they're driving for long hours and long mileage. And
Yep.
I drove a truck for a short time, and it was just a box truck. But the way people act, when they're on the road with other like bigger trucks, tractor trailers, box trucks, whatever. It's not safe and it's not easy. And like driving, for more than an hour, try staying awake, when you're just looking ahead. And like sometimes there's like, if I was driving down 95, there's always something to look at, do some kind of visual on the side. But if you're driving down the turnpike, even the New Jersey turnpike going up to like New York, you're just looking at cars. Or if you're going out towards like where you live, Mike, in Carlisle, it's just concrete.
Yeah.
It's for me at least, sometimes it was hard to stay awake.
Yeah. When I worked scheduling freight back in the end of the 90s, early 2000s, we had a weekly run that was from Philadelphia to Youngstown, Ohio. It's about the maximum distance that a single driver is allowed to drive in one day. And it just went out there every single week. And I'm like, that has to be the most god-awful route for any of these guys to drive, because it's the turnpike all the way out. And you're, 10 hours. Probably was more like 8. But it was like 550 miles or something like that. I felt for those guys.
Do they have to do it within a certain period of time?
It was a 1-day run. So if a single driver went out, he would be required to sleep like 8 hours before he could get back on the road.
If I remember correctly, you're allowed to work for 14 hours, but you can only drive for a total of 11. So once you hit 11 hours driving, you have to take, I believe, it's 8 hours. You have to take an 8-hour break. Whether or not you sleep or not,
right.
It would probably be a good idea, but it's not something required where you have to sleep for 8 hours, but you can't drive for another 8 hours. So
it used to be that they had they had a travel book, and they
Yeah.
kept all of their mileage and all of their stops and everything in that book. And that book was for the Department of Transportation to be able to audit them to make sure that the drivers were not, driving too much.
Right. Yeah,
But
it's a
those books,
logbook.
yeah, the logbook, but those were easy when you're writing in them with a pen or a pencil. They were very easy to fudge. Today, all tractor trailers have GPS, so there's really no way for them to fudge time and miles.
Well, they have a computer system in the trucks.
Yeah.
I talked with a guy who did construction work and excavating, and he had a dump truck. And this was a couple years ago when I worked at Land Rover, because he did some of the work for the dealership. If there was like something that needed to be done, or he did some work on like people's houses and stuff as well. But he was saying how even with his dump truck, they actually want him to have they I don't know if there's like like various different systems, but they call it a Qualcomm.
Yeah.
And like they even wanted it to be in his vehicle. This way, he has to. It automatically keeps track of it. Like you're putting it in the computer, so you can't fudge it. You can't rip a page out and rewrite it saying like, oh well, I started at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock.
Right.
I've only been driving for 6 hours when it's actually been 8 hours. You can't do that because it's in the computer.
Right.
And when I worked at the warehouse, this was in the mid 2000s. There was the trucks that came in, the tractor trailers delivering the freight. They had the computer systems in their truck,
right,
where they would have to punch it in and everything. Okay, I stopped at this time. I'm taking a break. I'm back on the road, or I did this, and you actually have to write down what you did. If you were working or if you were, whatever it is. So
whatever it is, because I know about those truck stops, so you can't talk about that.
Was that
their downtime?
Can't talk about those truck stops. What you do at the truck stop, you can't write that in the log.
Yeah, some things it's kind of like Vegas. What happens at the truck stop stays at the truck stop. Yeah, it's just like other professions too. Like being a school teacher, that's not an easy job. You're dealing with a bunch of fucking idiot kids
that are not yours, that you can't.
Wait. I say douche, and you complain about having to edit, and you just dropped the F-bomb.
I did not. Or at least once I edited, I did not. Yeah, like a job like that. Like I actually at one point thought about being a teacher. I was going to teach automotive, but one, I didn't think I knew enough about automotive to be a good teacher, and two, I didn't want to be stuck around kids all day. I wouldn't last at all. But even doctors, lawyers, people look at lawyers as as like, oh, great, he's a lawyer, but some of them are scumbags, but others, they actually do good work, where they're fighting for people's rights, or trying to get them taken care of. Like if they were wronged in some way, they're there to fight for them, so I just think we should, as a society, we should put a focus on, not saying that we shouldn't thank people for doing certain things, but we should kind of, thank other people as well. Stop looking down upon them and actually, be thankful for them.
Well, considering what's going on right now with the employment crisis, as I guess they're calling that, they're starting to realize that people are not taking it anymore. They don't want to do these jobs. They rather stay home than deal with the disrespect. It's pretty bad. Like I can't go out to a restaurant without watching people just behave like complete idiots because there's not enough staff. So they're abusing the staff that did show up.
Right. Yeah.
So imagine how they were treating the people that, when they had full staff at these places. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's actually an article I read the other day talking about this particular subject, where a lot of people are fighting for like higher minimum wage, and now the people who are leaving certain industries and going to the higher wages that are available, it's actually forcing those, like the restaurant industry, to change. Where there was one specific restaurant that the article spoke about, but it's going on all across the country where they're actually increasing the wages, trying to get people, hey, come work for us. Instead of us paying you, a $2 tipped wage, we're actually going to pay you $10 an hour, or we'll pay you $15 an hour.
It's about time.
The particular restaurant, I forget where it was, but they were saying that their wages are between $18 and $24 an hour for their staff now. And the way that they're covering for it, which I don't agree with, is they're charging an extra 20%. So there's a 20% surcharge on all the checks.
So they're basically putting the tip into the food or whatever, right?
Well, no.
Why don't they just raise the price rather than adding 20%? Why don't they just raise the price of the food?
Exactly.
Yeah.
In this case, though, it's a 20% surcharge that they put on the check, and any tips that are given, it goes into a pot and then it's split amongst the staff. So they can still collect tips, which I'm fine with. If you want to give somebody a tip, then whatever floats your boat. But it shouldn't be where the customer is paying the wages of the employee. It's the responsibility of the employer. And if the employer can't do that, then he just shouldn't be in business.
Well, see, we know that I don't necessarily agree with this because we've kind of had this discussion. And the examples that you brought up, like diners. So, yeah, no, I don't think any diner waitress is making a boon in tips because the meals are cheap and they don't get a whole lot in tips. So yeah, I could see prices going up in that in order to pay for a better wage. But like the place, a lot of the places that I go to, the bar restaurants that I go to, most of the top bartenders and servers would quit if they went to a wage, if they went to a straight wage, because they won't make the money.
They probably make more in tips, right?
Right. Yeah, they make a lot more in tips. And when you're talking about putting all the tips in a kitty and then divvying them out evenly, years ago I dated a server, and she went to a place that was doing that and complained endlessly because a couple other people that they worked with didn't do work. They were terrible and they were lazy. And so the woman I was dating was getting tipped really well because she did her job really well, and then was having to give away those tips to people who were lazy. So they hated it. It's called what do they call it?
Pulling the tips.
Yeah.
I can see that point of view, but also with like a server, they're not doing everything.
But a server has to tip out the. They have to. They tip out the kitchen. They tip out the bartenders. So yeah, they are giving away some of their tips because they don't do their job by themselves. But some of that tip money does go to those people who do deserve it because they don't get seen. Now that also helps bartenders. When you get to the point of being a bartender, so not only are you serving everyone at the bar, but you're also making all the drinks for everyone in the rest of the restaurant. And so you make tips from everyone at the bar that you serve, and then all of the servers tip you out because you made their drinks for their tables. And so bartenders make damn good money. And especially good bartenders are not going to accept a flat wage.
No, then they can do something else. They don't have to do that. But it shouldn't be where the bar that we used to go to, Mike, Tom and Jerry's. That place makes a ton of money, and they don't have to spend any of it.
How do you know? Have you ever seen their books?
Exactly how much money they make, I have no idea. But
Right.
I see the amount of crowds that are the amount of business that they do with the crowds.
I understand that, and
the place does generate a lot of money.
But that doesn't mean that they don't. That doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of costs. Restaurants are one of the hardest. Restaurant and bars are some of the hardest businesses to succeed in, and it's rare that they succeed. When restaurants and bars are started, I believe it's the department. I think it's the Department of Labor statistic that in the first 5 years, 80% of new restaurants and bars fail. And
isn't that the same or similar to any business? Most businesses fail.
Most new businesses do fail, but not as high a degree as the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry has the highest failure rate among new establishments.
Right. I do have there's two stories. It's a two-part story in the book that actually deals with this topic. But just to go a little bit more with it, the one manager that I had at Land Rover, who we were discussing earlier before we started the discussion itself, he worked for a dealership in Allentown for a number of years, and he left there. And between him leaving there and then starting at this dealership where I worked, I think it was like 2 years he was out of work. And I don't know if it was the full 2 years or not, but a portion of that time, a friend of his owned a pizza shop. So he was actually working there running the pizza shop. Mm-hmm. And we were discussing at work one day, what kind of, money can generate at a pizza shop. And so we asked them, is like, what kind of money do they make? I was like, they make a ton of money. It costs like $1 to make a pizza. They're selling it for 15, yeah, there's a lot of profit in that.
There can be, but there's also lease costs. There's cleaning costs. There's heating costs of electric, and cost of your employees, and a huge part is the taxes that these establishments have to pay, and so if full-timers are offered health care. So in the corporate world, what most people don't see is the full cost of an employee. They believe, like, for a salaried position, you see the person's salary and you think that that's what the company is paying for that person because that's what goes into their paycheck. Okay, but most companies that offer health care for their workers, they are paying 40% of that salary on top of the salary to provide health care for that worker. So if you make, trying to figure out a way to make this easy numbers, 40%, because I don't want to go to 100 grand because not a whole lot of people make that. But still, if you looked at it, because it'd be easy numbers, for the individual who's making a salary of $100,000, the company is paying $140,000 to have that employee, because it costs.
There's a way to correct that, and there's a guy that's been fighting for that for the last 30 some years.
Are we talking about Bernie?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of problems with that too, but I don't think we should really get into I mean, we probably shouldn't even be on this topic. I mean,
Yeah,
we should be, it's a great point that many people in many jobs that are unappreciated or underappreciated should get a lot more thanks for what they do. Because society doesn't, our first world society doesn't exist without those.
Yes. We're going to move. Nikki, did you have anything else that you wanted to discuss pertaining to being thankful?
I was just gonna say, you were talking about being thankful for different jobs. It's one of the things I tell women when we're on my podcast. Don't demean the garbage men, the guys you see in the blue collar jobs, because they do make a good living and they're providers. So
Yeah.
you're feeding into that. We have discussion all the time. These women are like, I'm looking for a corporate guy, or I'm looking for a lawyer or a doctor. What's wrong with the garbage man? He's gonna be home by 5 every night, and he's gonna bring home a good check.
And he's gonna stink.
Hey,
no, but I know what you're saying.
I'll draw him a bath. I'll make sure he takes a shower.
Yeah. Actually, on that point, you mentioned your podcast. Go ahead and plug your podcast so people can know where to look for you.
We're going to be launching the podcast, Why Am I Single? We started out as actually like a group in Maine a couple years ago, where it's kind of coaching some men and women and trying to get into a relationship or figure out the issues that they were having trying to stay in a relationship. So after I moved away from Maine, I moved that to a podcast format. So we're going to be doing some good interviews and stuff. And this is one of the topics we're going to talk about. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You have a couple different podcasts, because I spoke with you about a different one recently.
Yes, the second one we want to get launched at some point. I'm hoping by the end of the year. It's the Good Friends and Good Books podcast. We're trying to create like a launching pad for authors that haven't been able to get their books published. I guess the regular way, doing like a serial. So if you have a book, you have a good idea, you have something that's imaginative that can be just voiced and acted out in a podcast format, we're looking for you. Send me your transcripts. We're taking everything. So I'm excited to get that started.
Very cool.
I know a guy that has a publishing company.
Who's that?
Voces TV is actually brought to you by De Familia Voces, a publishing company. That was started last year. It's basically for me, or the main purpose was for me to make my books more professional. I've already self-published 5 books, and looking at them when I published them, I thought they were great. And I tried to edit them the best that I could with my limited experience as far as like editing and like with grammar and sentence structure, but also with the book cover itself, with me trying to do artwork, for it. It just, looking back at it, it's like, these are really basic and I don't want to be basic anymore. So I started the publishing company to make it look more professional. Started using proper programs to do artwork, and learning how to do it better so I can create the book covers. And see if I can go through and show the book covers here again for these 3 stories. And then actually, that's the main cover for volume 3. I created all these covers for them, did all the artwork. But I also have an editor now, somebody who is a professional editor that can go through and say, hey, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You need to reword this, or put a little more detail here, or maybe change it this way. Like I really don't know what's going on with this. Like the one story, um, mental health evaluation 2081. At the end of the story, where the one character pushes the chair backwards and storms out, slams the door. Um, as she was going through it editing, she messaged me saying, "Hey, who are you talking about here? There's not really any. You're not specifying who it is." And I reread it, and anytime I write something, I always think it's great because it's something that I did. But having her bring something, like making me notice something, like, okay, you're right. It doesn't really show who's pushing the chair. I know who's pushing the chair because I wrote it, but the reader's not going to know. And sometimes I want the reader to, use their imagination. But in an instance like that, it's, you need to specify. So now having the editor can actually help with that. So it does look better, and that's what I want. But as far as like what you're doing, that's really cool. When you first told me about it, I thought it was a great idea, especially having people come in and act out the book. So it's kind of like an audiobook, but taking it a step forward. Being creative. So that was really cool. If you can send me some information on it once you get it launched, I can put it up here on the website for De Familia Voces, and point some links to you.
Thank you.
Not a problem.